Hi, I'm Julia, and you're tuned in to Climate Action Figures.
Hello and welcome to a brand new edition of Climate Action Figures. My name, as always, is John Whidden, and this week on the show you get to meet Julia. But first, this week's QuickFix. Last week, after Alida and I finished recording, she shared a quick fix that actually made me laugh out loud. She said we could share it with you this week. So she said, I am notorious for turning out lights. Some members of my family suggest that I may be a vampire. I just like to save electricity. Plus, reduced lighting creates more ambiance around your house. So welcome, Julia.
Hi, John. Thanks so much for having me.
What do you think about that quick fix?
I love it. I think it's a great way to kind of set the tone in the family to be that, lead by example, lead by doing. But hopefully no one's, reading while she's doing that or something like that. So, yeah. It's a good fix.
Exactly. Now, that was last week. Before that, Emma was on Climate Action Figures a couple of weeks back, and she recommended we talk with you, and she described you as a youth who is doing great things around food systems. We certainly appreciate that Emma made that connection.
I met Emma through, climate organizing and activism in Ottawa, and met her at one event, and then you start to see, I met her at the next event, and the next event, and the next event. So, yeah, it's a pretty cool community to tap into once you start seeing familiar faces. It's pretty cool.
It's kind of neat how you hear the names and then you see the people and then you see them again and you build those relationships. That's great.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's start, Julia, with that term, food systems. How would you define that?
Food systems are really complex, and they're intentionally complex because it kind of is looking at our food system, which a lot of people don't really pay much attention to as a system, in all of its different inputs. So that's anything from our biological systems, our social systems, our economic system, our political system, and how that all kind of relates to food in addition to agriculture. So what does that look like? Environmental systems, we're thinking about soil health, we're thinking about water input, we're thinking about biodiversity of crops. When you think about social systems in food, you're looking at food and culture and food and history, and how that's connected to people's stories and families and really deep ties to history. And political systems, we're thinking about policies that govern how our food is bought, sold, priced. That's more economic systems as well. So adopting a food systems lens is really zooming out to see the role that food plays in our lives in all these really complex and often hidden ways. It's starting to think about food not just from the experience that we usually have at the grocery store, buying something, cooking with it, and then it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. You're starting to think about, how did that apple get to me? What was, the quality of the life for the farmer that grew that apple? What was the soil like? What were the conditions behind the growth of that apple? Where's that apple going when the core is no longer used? And you're starting to really see all the different ways that our food interacts with us every day. And it's starting to make those things visible.
You said intentionally complex. Why intentionally? Tell us about that.
Whenever people talk about something in a really simplistic way, it's easy to ignore, especially the climate impacts that has. And oftentimes when we take a moment to start to see things as it is, sort of all the different tendrils in which this sometimes simple thing as, eating 3 times a day, how that's connected to all these other systems, we can start to bridge those connections and see how, maybe this interest, whether political interest, ideological interest, is starting to make its way through and influence all these other factors. And when we start to piece those things together, it can make us smarter about how we, say, link arms when we're advocating for a policy change that is both connected to labor rights when you think about farming, is connected to biodiversity when you're thinking about farming, is connected to soil health, and then is also connected to, say, food literacy and how youth, for instance, are learning how to cook and feed for themselves. And so you start to see all these connections across the board that maybe previously, if you weren't thinking more in a systems lens, you start to kind of compartmentalize them and make them simpler than they are.
Now, this ties into an organization you have spent some serious time with called Food Futures in Ottawa. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Food Futures?
So I launched, when I was working at Just Food, Food Futures, and that's really targeting the demographic 18 to 25-year-olds and getting those youth interested and knowledgeable about advocating for municipal food policy at the local level. So that's anywhere from learning how Ottawa City Council works, learning about opportunities to delegate to City Council and what angles really work, volunteering, note-taking at the Ottawa gathering where all these different advocates come together across, whether they're working on biodiversity, whether they're working on housing, whether they're working on food justice, coming together to share solutions at the municipal level. So really giving youth access to different channels to engage at the municipal level for something that can often feel really far away from power, which is the demographic of youth. Food Futures helps build those skills to learn how to engage in a strategic way, informed by adults who have kind of been in this world for a long time. And in that process, really honing in on what is it that makes our youth voice powerful and how we can start to leverage that to make change in the city.
Now, Food Futures, you mentioned, I didn't realize you'd actually started that organization. That's very cool. What's your hope for that Food Futures in the future?
Great question. We officially reached our cohort 1. So first cohort, there was 15 youth. They signed on to, be a part of it for a year. And in our second cohort, we have 8 remaining that are still really engaged and looking to bring on some new members. And with the election coming up in the city of Ottawa, we want to really be engaging youth around Ottawa in capturing their youth voice about really what matters to them and presenting that to candidates to say, this is what people are concerned about, and not just focusing on the concerns, but we also want to sort of crowdsource from a youth perspective what an ideal food future for us could look like, and come up with some creative ideas and really stretch our imagination about what is possible.
All this talk about, elections makes me wonder if you are excited by the recent results of the New York City election.
Yeah, it's very exciting. When we're talking about the People's Official Plan, looking at that systems thinking, not now looking at homelessness just from its again, isolated issue, but looking at a broader scale. How is that connected to mental health? How is that connected to food security? How is that connected to housing? And really starting to see a leader bring together different issues to address a root rather than just kind of band-aid solutions is really inspiring in such a urban core that hopefully can lead by example and start to just see those ideas that we were just talking about that we're trying to kind of crowdsource in Ottawa and see how things can be different. Sometimes it does take some leaders in other faraway places to try things and just show how things can be different. And I think that's an exciting time for sure.
Right. I was talking with a very astute friend who happens to be a fan of the show. So hi to David out there. He was just wondering if this kind of new, exciting young leadership is going to hit the old school structures and disintegrate, or will he have success? The bigger question, I guess, for you, Julia, is what keeps you from despairing when you see how little youth are listened to by the old school structures around us?
Even before maybe these last 5 years, the ability to kind of turn away or ignore some of the most pressing issues of today was easier. And I think the reality is now it's not invisible. It's actually really loud. And even those people who have experienced, the most privilege or have been sort of separate from food security issues, housing crisis, rising cost of living. A lot of these things are right in most people's faces now. And so I think people are feeling pretty disillusioned by the solutions that have typically been presented. And so I think there is an appetite for change. And I hear you about, coming up against what feels just like a cement wall sometimes, but there's a shift. There's an agitation right now. And I think historically agitation can be met with false kind of promises that can further disillusion people. And maybe, what we're seeing now is often like scapegoat to different marginalized groups as the problem and really avoid, again, the root issue, which is mass inequity on like a global scale. And when we start to actually address that inequity and we see how it is so pervasive across all of these different aspects of our life, we can start to get closer to naming the problem in an honest way. And then hopefully, once we name the problem in an honest way, we can start to see solutions that are actually addressing that problem, and we won't be so swayed by those false solutions. And I think he's really speaking to that hurt that people are feeling. He's not ignoring it. He's not pretending that it doesn't exist, but he's trying to offer solutions in a different way. And I think it's courageous, and definitely in this political climate, especially in the US, very bold, and I'm excited by it. It's haven't felt that way in a while.
Good to hear a different voice from south of the border.
Yeah.
Now, I've taken us down a big tangent, which is very interesting and important, but let me reel it back and focus back on food systems. How do food systems tie into climate change?
So I showed you that graphic at the beginning, which is one that I really refer to because it's a great way to kind of visualize what I'm talking about with food systems. When you're talking about food systems and climate change, again, we're looking at how our resources are used. So from a water resource allocation, we're looking at soil, which is one of the most complex and finite resources that we have in Canada. And, it is so precious and such something to be so sacred and really taken care of. And with climate change and increased natural disasters, not so natural, climate disasters, that now that we refer to them more accurately, all of these things that support our food systems are more and more threatened, whether that's drought, whether that's flooding, whether that's monoculture, all planting the same thing, really resource intensive for one type of species, reducing biodiversity, which impacts our pollinators, which therefore impacts the rest of our food system. These are all connected to a changing climate, and all these issues start to become more and more exacerbated. Also, when we start to think about how vulnerable we are, Canada alone imports around 90% of our seed supply. So when we start to see things like that and the vulnerabilities we have to protecting our own food sovereignty as a nation and our connections to the globe, we start to think about food systems, advocacy, food justice issues apart from climate change. People feel that they can access that food systems conversation a little bit easier, when sometimes environmentalism can feel like a conversation they don't know enough about to contribute to. But I eat 3 times a day. This matters to me. It's something that's right in front of my face. And so I think we're going to be confronted with that more and more.
Right. This leads to a question that I asked last week, and I'm going to ask you, maybe it'll be a regular question from now on. Can the climate crisis be solved within the current economic framework, economic structure?
I find that very hard to believe when our system is designed with profit in mind as the main metric of success. And our built within capitalism is a short-sightedness. And if we're not thinking long term about the impacts of the decisions we make today, and if our main driver for our decisions is profitability, then the system is functioning the same way it was designed to right now, and we will keep prioritizing that. And we're coming up against some very real tipping points and have already surfed past them, and the market isn't really getting us there as it promised to if the profitability will not align with these kind of emergency circumstances. I think it's moving too slowly. And so there are very real value shifts that need to happen in how we make decisions. And I think if those decisions are always being governed by how profitable something is, then it will never make sense in the current model. And then we're going to be too far gone. I think ultimately we need like a massive reorientation of values. And right now we have all the evidence in the world to show us that things are in a really scary place, and we're not responding in the way that reflects that reality in our current model. And so something really needs to change at a scale that aligns with the risks that we're looking at head on and that we have all the knowledge about. And that will take courage, and it will be different, and it will be hard, and it won't be as convenient. And there will also be a lot of good that comes out of it. Those are the types of conversations that I hope we start to have more and more of.
Well, I have to say, when I was in my 20s, I had not thought that much about maybe anything. But most youth, I dare say, are not that concerned about food systems, nor have they thought that deeply about food systems. How did it catch your attention and interest?
I was coming out of my master's program in political economy, and my research was comparing Canada's COVID versus climate response to show that, when a crisis is made a priority, all these political windows become available, things can really start to change. And through that very interdisciplinary degree, where you look at a lot of these different things and how they all kind of relate to climate change, food systems is a part of that. And so I started to look more and more into that work, and found it through a job, and then started to go deeper and deeper into that. That got me to start the Food Futures group, and now even working in Northwestern Ontario for a contract right now, I'm still connected to the work because I think it's so important. And I think food is a unique entry point. I think a lot of people, like I mentioned earlier, have a hard time seeing how climate connects to their everyday. But the reality is, like, food is a more approachable way to kind of meet people. It's a core part of how we gather. It's a part of our identities. And there's a huge climate component too that I think people are becoming more and more aware of. And I think that's inspiring, and it's a cool way to get through to people.
Julia, clearly you find it important to lead other youth, maybe younger than yourself or your age, to find ways to develop their voice and have their voice heard. A totally random question. If you could sit down with every 16-year-old on earth for 2 minutes, what would you say to them?
Oh my God. Okay. No pressure. My first thing I would say is, if you're feeling stressed, it makes sense. As a young person, I think it's very easy to feel stressed out about your future right now. And I would have maybe wanted that validation. I now refer others to the climate wheel, the climate motions wheel. Sometimes when I was a young person, I was feeling all those emotions at the same time. You're not alone in that, and it makes a lot of sense. And the next thing is that you have immense power, more than you think, and you don't need to be everything. There's something for you to contribute, and there's something for everyone's role to play. And so if you feel really connected to climate change and wanting to make a difference, don't spread yourself too thin to the point when you lose steam or completely, put yourself into like a really, really dark place about the future. There's a place for joy and community and celebration and lightheartedness and humor in the world we're trying to build. And you are a critical element, but it's not all on you. And so link arms with people that care, keep doing things that bring you joy and meaning, and also find a way to think about the future and find your place in making it a better world bit by bit.
Wow, that sounds like a speech that could get you elected prime minister. Very wise words. Thanks for sharing that. Now, I feel like we could talk for hours, but we need to bring it to a close today. And before we do, we need to hear about your climate action. What have you chosen today?
I've really started to really think about how I consume and think differently, and really ask myself, is that a need? And, there's some things that are wants and that feel really good, but really trying to think about our culture of disposability. And we always think we can just order another thing. just order another one. If that breaks, just order another one. And I think that's kind of a dangerous, convenient thing, and it makes a lot of part of the process pretty invisible. So yeah, holiday seasons are coming. I'm thinking about even the thing I'm going to buy for someone. I don't want it to end up in a landfill. Think about it. Take a beat. Are they going to really appreciate this thing? Do I need this new thing? Just kind of reframing how we consume and not being so short-sighted about it. And also mending what you've got. I have no idea how to darn or how to embroider, but I'm trying, and I want to put a little strawberry over a hole in my thumb, and I'm giving it a go. So get crafty with it. Maybe it's fun, you know?
More great advice from Julia. You've given us a lot to be hopeful about today, Julia. If I could ask you in a phrase, what gives you hope?
The biggest thing that gives me hope is that in all of the spaces that I've been in that are all, climate oriented, whether it's, climate action, we've got truth on our side. We have all the evidence on our side. And we also have a lot of love. At the root of a lot of activism is just like an immense desire for people to be okay and for people to have the things that they need to live well, and for that to extend beyond even humans, that we're caring for things outside of ourselves. And I think that's a pretty cool thing to get behind. It might be hard. It's going to ruffle feathers. It's going to be abrasive, and you're going to come up against people that don't believe in that. But ultimately, I think it's a really compelling thing to get behind. And on the other side, there can be like a lot of hate and division. And I don't think that can last very long before we loop back around to really wanting community again. And so that's what gives me hope. And I think a lot of people around the world are connecting dots right now. People are linking arms behind issues and starting to connect the dots, and that's an inspiring place to be in. And historically, we've been there before, and I think it's a good time to kind of really sink into that and see each other's humanity in the process. Everyone has a role to play, so that's what gives me hope.
Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to connect some dots for us today, Julia.
Thank you so much for having me. Am I allowed to leave with one parting quote that's kind of
Absolutely.
My favorite one? Okay.
Julia's parting quote.
It's by an amazing author and person, Robin Wall Kimmerer. Okay, here goes. I refer to this often. Even a wounded world is feeding us. Even a wounded world holds us, giving us moments of wonder and joy. I choose joy over despair, not because I have my head in the sand, but because joy is what the earth gives me daily, and I must return the gift.
Beautiful. We will be back next week, same time, same place, to hear from another wonderful climate action figure. Until then,
go figures!
This has been Climate Action Figures. Our show is produced and hosted by John Whidden. Our creative consultant is Kayla McIntosh. Our theme song is Hawaii Vacation by Tavari. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Climate Action Figures. That's all one word. And if you have any other questions or comments that arose from this or any episode, feel free to reach out to us at climateactionfigures@gmail.com. And thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another Climate Action Figure.